Okay, everybody, so this is the guided reading text that we are going to ask you to look at for today and tomorrow. It is an extract from The War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells. So, The War of the Worlds was a book that was written by H.G. Wells many years ago, and it has since been created into a film with Tom Cruise in it, and more recently it was also a TV show. I think it was on BBC. You can probably find it on the iPlayer. What's really interesting about that is that when they recorded it, part of the TV show that they recorded was actually filmed in Formby Pinewoods. So it's definitely worth watching, so you might recognise where they filmed. Another interesting fact about it was that years ago, so before TV was popular, they actually did a radio version of it with actors and actresses pretending to be reporting on what was happening. And some people actually tuned into the radio broadcast and thought that it was real, that aliens were actually attacking the world. They didn't realise it was a show, that people were acting it out. So anyway, let's jump straight into this. What I'm going to do today is read through, and any words that I think you might not be too sure of the meaning, I'm going to underline and pick out. What I'd like you to do is try to predict what you think the word means. You don't have to use a dictionary. You can if you've got one if you wanted to, but to try to work out what you think the word means based on what the sentence says. Some of the words I will explain what they mean whilst we're reading through this first time, but other words I want you to have a look at yourself. Okay, and I'm going to be highlighting words as we go through. So, a spacecraft from Mars has crash landed on Earth, creating a massive crater near the town of Woking. So, this first word I'm going to underline, Woking, is a place in America. So, you don't need to research that. Crater, you should hopefully know what a crater is, but it's a large area that's created a hole in the ground. People have gathered around the edge of the pit to look at the Martians and their craft. And again, Martians is another word for aliens. So people have gathered to look at the aliens, and their craft is their spaceship, basically. Okay, so those three words I've explained to you. The rest of the words I underline or highlight, I'd like you to try and work out what you think they mean yourself. You can do that on paper, or you can do it on the back of this sheet or to the side of the sheet, and then on Friday's video I will explain what those words mean before you go on to answer the questions yourself. Okay, so after the glimpse I had had of the Martians emerging from the cylinder in which they had come to the Earth from their planet, a kind of fascination paralysed my actions. So the first word I'm going to pick out is paralysed. I remained standing knee-deep in the heather, staring at the mounds that hid them. I was a battleground of fear and curiosity. Heather is the second word in that section. I did not dare to go back towards the pit, but I felt a passionate longing to peer into it. I began walking, therefore, in a big curve, seeking some point of vantage, and continually looking at the sand heaps that hid these newcomers to our earth. Once a leash of thin black whips, like the arms of an octopus, flashed across the sunset and was immediately withdrawn, and afterwards a thin rod rose up, joint by joint, bearing at its apex a circular disc that spun with a wobbling motion. What could be going on there? Apex, I'm going to pick out. So at this point, it is a spaceship, or the alien, that looks like an octopus, and the thin black whips are the legs that are basically kind of coming out and lifting it up. Most of the spectators had gathered in one or two groups, one a little crowd towards Woking, the other a knot of people in the direction of Chobham. Evidently, they shared my mental conflict. There were few near me. One man I approached. He was, I perceived, a neighbour of mine, though I did not know his name, and accosted. So perceived, and also accosted. But it was scarcely a time for articulate conversation. Articulate. What ugly brutes, he said. Good God, what ugly brutes! He repeated this over and over again. Now, I would have picked out the word brutes, but you should hopefully have found the definition of that in Word of the Day, which was just before this lesson. So hopefully I don't need to pick out the word brutes. You should know what it means. Did you see a man in the pit? I said, but he made no answer to that. We became silent and stood watching for a time side by side, deriving, I fancy, a certain comfort in one another's company. Deriving? Then I shifted my position to a little knoll that gave me the advantage of a yard or more of elevation, and when I looked for him presently, he was walking towards Woking. So a knoll and elevation, I'll explain. So that gave me the advantage of a yard or more of elevation. Elevation means to be higher up than you were before. Okay, so if you're elevated, or think about an elevator, so the American word for a lift, it's to take you up to a higher place. Okay, so knoll, I want you to find out, but elevation, I've explained to you. So this was the extract so far. Okay, these words I've picked out in green from the second paragraph. Can you have a think what these words could mean based on what you've read? If you want to use a dictionary, if you've got one, you can do. But where possible, can you try to think about what they could mean without the use of a dictionary? Okay, tomorrow you're going to answer some questions based on it. So it's just about looking at these words and thinking what are the definitions. Okay, everybody?